everyone. Welcome back to another episode of the podcast. I hope you are doing well. So, to give you all a little update, I started a digital detox 2 weeks ago, and this is not my first time. I actually did a 30-day digital detox last December, and I turned off my phone completely. I've talked about this a little bit before. I turned off my phone completely, and I relied entirely on my Apple Watch for 30 days. And it was successful. I completed it, and it felt great. There were a lot of positives that I experienced in that 30 days. And after that was up in January of this year, I kind of slowly went back to my normal scrolling habits. And I've tried to be really mindful of my content consumption this year. But man, those numbers, that screen time just really sneaks up on you. And so I have been feeling this call to do another digital detox. And this time I went for 100 days, and that carries me into February, the beginning of February. And if I'm being honest, I think I might, I'm weary to say this out loud in case I change my mind. But at the moment, I'm thinking I might stick with this for the entire year. This time around, the way that I'm doing this digital detox, I still have my phone, but I have deleted basically all entertaining apps off of my phone to eliminate time spent consuming content. So the purpose of this is a few different reasons. One, I do want to give myself some time back to work on other things. I really want to pursue some creative projects. Just like pursue creative projects sounds so serious. I'm like, I want to do some arts and crafts, okay? I feel like I was so crafty when I was a young girl, when I was a kid growing up, all through high school. I was pretty crafty and I really enjoyed working with my hands and just making stuff. And I think I lost that when I got to college. And I've always wanted to return to it. Like in 2020, I bought a sewing machine and then just never used it. Learned how to use it. Actually, you know what? I'm staring at it right now. It stares back at me. It's just begging to be used. And it's on my list to like get to during this 100 days. We'll see if I get there. But I really want to make a quilt for my toddler. So I just have a number of things that I want to do on the creative side. I have all these ideas that I don't put into action because it's easier to sit and scroll than to attempt to learn something new. And aside from that, I've been feeling this call to go inward, which is what this podcast episode is going to be about. So when I say this call to go inward, like I was consuming a lot of content, right? Like podcast form, TikTok form, YouTube form. Like those are my three. Those are my big three. And I think that although I was always listening to more uplifting content, empowering content that made me laugh, it was still a lot of content. And it was clouding a lot of my mental space. So I think that this is common, right? And, I would sit and I would have to sit and try and think of like podcast ideas and TikTok ideas and just like, I don't know. I feel like I wasn't leaving much room for just like sporadic random ideas to come through. You know what I mean? Just like bursts of inspiration. I wasn't leaving space for that. And so that was something that I wanted to change. And I think also, there's always like the comparison piece to it. I think that I've strayed away from comparison in a lot of ways in terms of like comparing myself online. I'm not really comparing myself to like, like what other people like look like, what they dress like. Like I've grown out of that, I would say. That was more so a few years back that I was doing that. But I think that when it comes to like establishing my own voice, I think that, I can listen to podcasts and get caught up in the way that other people speak or the way that they portray information or yeah, just the topics that they're talking about. And I just wanted to eliminate a lot of that noise and really focus on establishing my own voice, which like I've been doing, but like let's go deeper into that. So, clouding out all of the noise, just having more clarity, and then also removing some of that comparison, I think was just going to be helpful. So, those were some of the main reasons that I was thinking consciously. And I also feel like this was just intuitively guided. Like it was just popping into my head, like, you need to turn off your phone. You need to turn off your phone. You need to turn off your phone. Which, like I said, I'm not turning it off completely, but it was just like this, like digital detox, digital detox. And I was thinking about it every single day until I finally decided to do it. So, like I said, started the 100 days, and then we're going to potentially go through the year and just see kind of what happens. I think the reason, and I'm guessing here because I feel like I always guess where my intuition is leading me, and I'm like, I'm actually pretty wrong most of the time. So maybe it's not even worth guessing, but I just want to like share the way that I've been thinking about things. When I reflect back on the progression that I have made, what's really interesting is, and I think I actually may have talked about this in my last episode, but when I first started this journey, it was like blindly following my intuition. It was a lot of exploration. Then I discovered I was an energy healer, and then I spent a year healing, coming home to myself. And now I feel like it's this journey inward of like, okay, now who am I as a soul? And I've been doing these shamanic journeys, and I've done 3 so far. And one of the biggest takeaways from these journeys is this healer has really taught me how to connect in with my higher self and ask questions to myself directly. I mean, I was doing a little bit of that before, but I think this kind of like, I want to say the word like enunciated, but that's like not the, maybe not the right word. But yeah, I think she's just put more of a focus on establishing this as a practice moving forward. So I've, like I said, I've done a little bit of that before, but I think that I have really attempted, or I am in the process of just really attempting to turn inward for answers. So that is what I'd want to talk about in this episode. I also wanted to highlight, I think it's happening at a really interesting time because a lot of people around me are talking about AI, and I'm not like anti AI. I think that it has a lot of benefits, and it is a tool, right? So it's not about, a tool is not inherently good or bad. It's about the way that we use it. And with AI, I can see so many benefits around like, you know, the ability to research very quickly, and the ability, like, you know, knowledge is power, and access to resources and information, like that is all wonderful. And I think that can really help someone go far fast. But I think that what people should be weary of is continue like I think we already outsource our power as a, I don't know, civilization, it's a human race. You get it. Collective. As a collective, we already outsource our power a lot. And I'm afraid, not afraid, but I would be weary with AI to like, I think that there's a possibility to just like take that up a notch, to just like fully outsource. And I mean, this podcast is about like intuition, and the fact that we hold so many answers that we are seeking within, and so much information is available to us about the path that we are on and where we're going. And you know, it's, I've experienced a lot of this myself. Obviously, I'm on this intuitive journey, and it has been so empowering to turn inward for the answers and to get so much clarity through that process. So, in this episode, I want to share some examples I have from going inward and asking questions to my higher self and getting a lot of clarity, as well as my specific practice for connecting to my higher self, like how I sit in meditation and actually do that, in case you are interested in replicating that yourself. As well as, I think maybe in the show notes, I'll share some resources that you can leverage as well. So, to start with, examples of going inward. So, I have always wanted to talk about how I named my podcast, and never really figured out when was a good time or a good place to kind of put this, but I think now is the right time because I actually had a lot of trouble naming my podcast, and I actually received the name in meditation. So I want to share what that actually looked like. So, actually, about several months before I had even decided to do a podcast, this is when I was sort of like in the process of what was it? When I was feeling called to start sharing my story, like I knew that was the next step in my journey, but I was still building the courage to do it. And I had a lot of resistance to this. And so I remember one specific time where I was like sitting in meditation. I think I was in my group mentorship program at the time. So we were practicing like sitting in meditation and like connecting to your guides or connecting to your angels. And so I think that one time I was sitting and practicing this, and I don't think I really even had any questions. I was just kind of like sitting in silence and like tuning into that specific energy and just like sitting in the energy of that. And an image flashed into my mind. It was quick. When I say I see like images in my mind's eye, I think that there are a lot of people who see them very vividly like dreams. And for me, it's like a quick flash of an image that's like not super clear or super vivid. So it was a flash of an image, and what it was a path. You can imagine like the yellow brick road from Wizard of Oz, just like a path. And on this path, I am walking, and it's pitch black. You can't see anything. And I am walking on this path, and as I am speaking, like you can imagine, like what does an echo look like visually, where it's kind of like like circles kind of like going out and out and out. I don't know if you're understanding what I'm saying, but it's kind of like circles and then circles and then circles kind of going out, right? Visual representation of an echo. Okay, so as I'm speaking, there is like these like rings, like echoes coming out of my mouth, and they're lit up and they're like gold. It's kind of like halos coming out of my mouth as I'm speaking. And those halos are lighting this path, and there are people following behind me. And I just got this visual that popped into my head, and it was this knowing that I had to speak and I had to share my story, because it was kind of like I was leading the way and people were going to be able to follow me through the sound of my voice. So I had that visual, and that was kind of like another message that I was receiving that was like, you need to do this, Lisa. Like, you have to do this. You have to build up the courage and just do this. So I saw that message, or I saw that image months prior to even deciding to do a podcast. And then months later, I was getting ready to do my podcast, and I wanted the name. Actually, the name that I thought I was going to use was Intuitively Led Life, because that kind of represented what I was talking about. It was like living an intuitively led life. And I remember sharing that with a friend, and his feedback was like, it doesn't quite like roll off the tongue. And I was kind of like, yeah, it's okay. And then I remember I started to record the episodes, and it like really did not roll off the tongue. And I was kind of like, I was second guessing it. I was like, I don't know, maybe this isn't the name. Maybe I should name it something else. And then I remember going on to like Spotify or the podcast app and like trying to, I like searched in that name to see if anyone had it, and nobody had it, but someone had something close, and that that name was trademarked. So I realized, oh shoot, like I actually can't use that name for a podcast. And when I finally made this realization, I had already recorded a few episodes. I don't know why. I had seen this podcast before, but I hadn't seen the trademark symbol before. So I realized all of this maybe like a week or two before I was like the date that I wanted to actually launch the podcast. And I was kind of like panicking. So I had this whole notes app in my phone where I was trying to like brainstorm what else could I possibly name this podcast that kind of like represents the same thing of like living by following your intuition, living intuitively led, and I couldn't think of anything. And I spent like a week just like randomly when I would have some time just like sit and try and brainstorm things. And I remember even asking my mentor at the time in this group mentorship program, and she was kind of like, I can't receive this for you. You have to receive this yourself. And she was right, by the way. And so finally one day I was like, you know what? Why don't I just like, why am I spinning my wheels trying to figure this out? Why don't I just sit in meditation and ask for the name of my podcast? So I sat in meditation and I asked the question. I asked for help naming my podcast. And I sat in silence for quite a bit. And then this image flashed back into my mind. This image that I had seen several months prior of me walking this path and these like halos coming out of my mouth as I was speaking and lighting up this path with people following behind me. And I remember okay, and then I saw another image specifically of just like feet walking on a path. And then I remember my brain trying to like make sense of the images that I was seeing. And so I was having thoughts come up that was like, walking the path. Like I was trying to like piece it all together. And then I just heard in my head the intuitive path. And the moment I heard it, it was like, that's it. That is it. It was like this aha moment. And that is typically how I distinguish my intuition from my thoughts when I'm sitting in meditation. My intuition feels like, yes, aha, without a shadow of a doubt, that is it. And so I immediately come out of meditation and I start scrolling or I look it up on Spotify, and there is nothing similar to that name. And so I was free to use it, and that is how I named my podcast. So this name, The Intuitive Path, to me represents, following the path of your intuition, which is this journey that I'm on, right? Deciding to blindly follow my intuition, have it supersede logic, and see where that leads me. And in addition, it is representative of this image that I was seeing where I am the leader. And through this process of speaking my truth and sharing my story, I am giving others, I'm leading the way and giving others an alternate path, right? Like an alternate path to the one that we are taught, the one that we are raised as the correct one to go on. It is the path of your intuition, and to offer that as a choice to people. And I do that by sharing my story. So that is how I named my podcast. I spent a week spinning my wheels and finally decided to sit in meditation, and within 15 minutes I received the answer. So I've actually used that same method to help put a lot of this podcast together. Sometimes an idea will pop into my head as to what I should talk about, and there have been several times the last 2 weeks, even this topic right here, where I've had to sit in meditation and ask, what should I talk about? What can I talk about that would be supportive for my audience? Things like that. And that is how I have been arriving at a lot of my podcast topics lately. So I think that this practice is super powerful, and I just did this yesterday in order to brainstorm for this podcast that I'm filming right now. And I remember the whole rest of the day feeling in this state of like abundance, because it was like to know that you have access to endless ideas and I don't know, just like answers and solutions, like all within. If you just have the willingness to get quiet enough to listen, that feels abundant, you know? I can't think of I don't know anything else that I've experienced that feels as abundant as that. So, if you are interested, I want to share with you my practice for going inward, how I sit in meditation and connect to my higher self in order to ask questions. It is pretty simple. And what I want to say first is I call it your higher self. I'll also say your soul. I think that there are some people who distinguish more so between the two. There are some people who use different language, like connecting to my spirit, connecting to, yeah, there's just a lot of a lot of ways, a lot of different words that people use. So I'm gonna say my higher self, but obviously whatever resonates with you. So when I connect to my higher self, what I believe that means is that I am connecting to the part of me, the part of my soul that is in energetic form and is therefore not bound by time or space. And that's important, like the time piece specifically, because to not be bound by time is therefore connecting with the part of you that knows where you're going, the part of you that can see 5 steps ahead, that the part of you that can see the whole journey because it is not bound by time. And that is why I view it as such a trusted resource to connect to that part of you, because the brain, the logical mind, is going to make predictions based off of past experiences. And so you can do that. You can follow your logical mind, or you can connect to the part of you that can see the path ahead and the fastest way to get there. And so that is who I believe that I am connecting to. It is that part of you with infinite intelligence, with wisdom, just the highest possible version of you. And anyone can do this, by the way. You do not have to be intuitive. I mean, like, we are all intuitive. We all have access to intuition, but you don't need to be like an energy healer and intuitive the way that I am in this space in order to do this. Literally anybody can do this. You all have access to information from your soul, from your higher self, if you are able to sit and quiet the mind. And the piece on quieting the mind. Okay, I am not an expert meditator by any way, shape, or form. Okay, I do not. I have not yet gotten to the point in my journey where I am sitting in meditation every single day for hours on end, or just every single day for that matter. Like, I think what I have gotten really good at is being able to differentiate between my thoughts and my intuition and like what that feels like. So that has helped me better be able to tune in, but it's a practice, right? Like, if you sit in meditation, you're gonna have a lot of thoughts surface. And as thoughts are coming up, if you let them arise and then keep bringing yourself back to the present over and over and over, you can train your mind to start to limit the amount of thoughts that are surfacing. And your intuition, or this connection to your higher self, like, they speak in those quiet moments. Okay, anyways, without further ado, this is my process. 1, I will sit down in a comfortable place, make myself comfortable, sitting down, lying down, whatever you prefer. I will start by clearing my space. So I do this through like a quick prayer, just like setting intention to clear my space. You can do this a million different ways. People use sage, people use, I want to say like sound baths, but like a sound bowl of some sort. There are like a million ways. I would just recommend finding something that resonates for you. I like using a prayer because I have it memorized and I can do it right now in like 5 seconds. You know what I mean? So you can look up different prayers that you can use, different ways, like, language that you can use when you are setting intention. I can share some resources in the show notes of this episode for a lot of this stuff, just like examples of ways that people clear their spaces and all of that. So I'll share some resources, but you start by clearing your space. And that is just to make sure that there is no interference of other energies while you are meditating and connecting to your higher self. Then I will take a few deep breaths, come back into my body, come into the present moment, and I will envision myself opening a door. And the door leads to my happy place. So when I was doing my shamanic journeys, this healer helped me to sort of build this out, which is nothing complex. She just told me to envision my happy place and my higher self was there. So my happy place looks like a meadow where there are lots of flowers and the meadow just goes on and on and on. So when I open the door, I'm in this meadow and then I envision my higher self there. And I typically just say hi, and you're building a relationship with your higher self, with yourself. And so, say whatever you want to say. I can, sometimes I'll open that door and sit down and just kind of like vent and say what's going on, or sometimes I'll ask questions, but like that is your space to connect to your higher self. I will say that it is important to ask the right questions when you are sitting down. So try to leave it open-ended. I wouldn't, if you're asking a question of like, should I go with A or B? And the real answer is C, and you just haven't discovered C yet, then you're limiting what your higher self can respond with, because you're asking, is it A or B? And the real answer is it's neither. Another tip for asking questions, I want to say like be open-ended, but also try and be specific about what you're looking for. So sometimes it's just like a little bit too broad and you got to like narrow it in a little bit. An example of this is just yesterday I asked, what should I talk about in my next podcast episode? And the answer I heard was, the possibilities are endless. And I was like, yeah, that's why I need help narrowing it down. But I wasn't getting an answer, and so I tried asking it a different way, and I asked, what would be beneficial to my audience for me to talk about in my next podcast episode? So just like narrowing it in a little bit, making it a little bit more specific, and that is when I received the answer. So this is like, this is an area of play, like play around with this, maybe take some time to write down your questions and like think them through before you're sitting into a meditative state. However you want to approach this, but I just want to share that it is important, the type of questions that you ask, and so that is something to think about. So after I ask the question, I will pay attention to what's popping up in my head. So this is where like tuning into your intuition can be helpful, because you're already kind of well versed in the intuitive senses, or maybe what your strongest sense is, and therefore you know what to pay attention to. But you can be receiving the answer visually, you can hear it. I would say hearing and feeling are my strongest senses. So I will usually hear the answer, but I can also experience like my head nodding for yes, or like my head shaking for no. And this is coming from someone with a very specific experience, okay? I actually haven't heard of anyone else. I'm sure there are people who experience that, but I just haven't heard of anyone else who does. But I get a lot of answers through my hands and through my body. So I can experience my head nodding for yes, or my head shaking for no, or maybe I'll start to feel things in different places of my body. For me, I experience a lot somatically. So those are my strongest senses. Sometimes, it could just be a knowing. So however you receive information, and again, this is just something that you have to practice. And I've also heard people say, sometimes you may not get the answer right in the moment, and pay attention to what's coming up for the rest of the day or for the rest of the next 2 days, and see if you get an answer that way somewhere in your reality. Maybe someone, in your personal life, a friend sharing with you something that you're like, that's it, that's the answer. For me, when I'm trying to differentiate between a thought and my intuition, I want to give you an analogy for like what this feels like for me. So have you ever tried to think of a word and it's like on the tip of your tongue, but you like can't quite get it? and you're sharing this with a friend, you're like, what is that word that like means this? And they're throwing possibilities at you, right? And you're like, oh no, not quite. Like, is it that? Is it that? I don't know. It could be that one. And then they throw out one final one, and you're like, that's it. It's like an aha moment. It's like a light bulb moment. You're like, that's the one. That's the word. That is how intuition feels like for me, differentiated between my thoughts. My thoughts are like, is that my intuition? Like, I heard that word. Could it have been that? And then when it's actually your intuition, it feels like, okay, that's it. So that is just an analogy of what it feels like for me, if that's helpful. I don't know if anyone experiences it that way, but actually, when I did my mentorship program, she did say that as well. So maybe that resonates. After I'm done having a conversation with my higher self, after I receive the answers that I need, I will always say thank you, and then I will like retreat back out of my happy place and close the door. And then from there, I will ground myself, because how I understand it is that when you are connecting to your higher self, your energy has to go up. And so you got to bring it back down to earth to make sure to ground yourself. I have forgotten to ground myself, and then I just feel kind of lightheaded, or like, I don't know, my eyes are like a little bit like they have trouble focusing. Like I feel ungrounded. So how I ground myself back in, and this is how every mentor I've ever had has taught me how to ground myself. So this is how I recommend. I visualize tree roots, and I can be like really ungrounded. So I imagine like big, like oak tree roots that start, if I'm sitting down, they can start at my feet or at my waist. You can have it come from like your root chakra, and they grow down, these roots grow down, extending from your body down into the earth, and then you can envision them going deeper, 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 deeper into the center of the earth, and that's where they kind of like lock in, and that is how you ground yourself back into the earth. I've also heard of people kind of starting from the ground, envision tree roots coming out of the ground, if this is like a better visualization for you, coming out of the ground and then coming up through your feet, up all the way up to your waist, and then coming back down, 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 down into the center of the earth. So however you want to visualize it, but just tree roots grounding you into the earth. And once I do that, I open my eyes, and that is how I connect to my higher self. So that was a long explanation, but if you want just like a quick something to reference, sit down, close your eyes, clear your space, take a few deep breaths, come back into your body, into the present moment, and then you will visualize a door that opens to your happy place, have a chat with your higher self, and then you will retreat back out of your happy place, close the door, ground yourself back into the earth. That is the meditation that I do, and it's been working. And it is kind of accumulation of like different pieces that I've learned from different mentors to put together just something that resonates for me. So I'm sharing my process, but I want to be clear that this is like not the one single way to do it. Everyone has their own style. I think it's just important to clear your space, set the intention to connect to your higher self, and ground yourself afterwards. And do that in whatever way works for you. There are also a lot of people who offer like guided meditations to do this. So actually, in the resources in the show notes, I'll include some links to people, maybe some more resources that you can learn about this specific topic, and just hear more stories from other people who have experience doing this, or anything that I find that could be beneficial on this topic of connecting to your higher self, things that have been useful or helpful to me in this process. So I hope that was helpful. I really hope that someone listens to this and tries this. Like, that would just make my day. So that is where I will leave you. I hope you have a great rest of the day, wherever and whenever you are listening to this. And I will see you again soon. Bye.